my involvement has been, I don't know how many hours, sat at the dining room table with the AutoCAD machine, driving my wife crazy with the click, click, click of the mouse for I don't know how many hours, days, months. My involvement in the design of the baseboards as they are now started out as the concept really of trying to maximise the space we had for storing trains, giving an area for a scenic railway over the top of it. The original concept David had was a lift system, and that lift system was intended to store about 180 odd trains on it. There were issues with manufacturer, supply, etc. So we looked at the space and went, why are we putting a lift system in here? Why are we filling it full of gadgetry? This space is as big as the main railway room. Why don't we make the maximum of it and in effect extend the railway? Just on the system as it is now, the intended purpose of it is that it's a continuous railway. So when you enter what we colloquially call HADES, but the storage system, a train doesn't necessarily have to stop. So it can run from the entry point right the way through over the 3.5 levels back to the layout level itself. It would allow us to run scenic trains through without them actually having to have a marshalled point, as well as allowing us to store the 180 trains which David originally wanted. The concept of the storage is that it's a one-way street, if you like. Everything runs, depending on the thing, everything runs clockwise around the room, in effect, and it doubles back on itself. The helix, which is over this side, which is it's a 1 in 50 downgrade all the way from the top level down to the very bottom level to be 100 mil off the floor, and then obviously the main layout runs back up so that they both join back up at the top layer. On the intermediate level, which we call level 3.5, which is between the scenic layer and this layer here where I am, which is the entry into 3.5, what I've actually done is the single direction runs inside the running lines for the main railway. So on these storage levels, the first line that you see in all the pictures, which is on the outside, if you like, that's the through line that everything runs round on. On level 3.5, it changes and they become the bi-directional running lines from the main layout, and everything inside it is then running in the same direction as the rest of the layout. So you get this crossover running. But it just means then that you don't have any polarity changes, you're not having to cross anything. So once a train comes through from the main layout into this line here, it doesn't have to cross another line. So that was also part of the process of how do we do it so that when it's electronically wired up, we haven't got any conflict. We haven't got any situations where there's a train waiting for another train to cross its path. So everything is fluidly running all of the time. You had issues like we're all getting older, you didn't want any duck unders, any areas to actually crawl under or to have to climb over the top of, as well as being able to walk into areas as well, and not have anything that you had to lift out to get through. That dictated that the layout had to run around the walls and have an island somewhere within the room, but it also had to have a minimum radius to it, which meant that you couldn't go too tight. It had to climb at a maximum 1 in 100 gradient all the way from the bottom back up to the top, and it had to link into the existing railway as well, so all of the heights were determined by what we've already got, so they're adjustable slightly but not by much. So therefore, over the course of a couple of months, trial and error, seeing how things would work, I came up with what we're building now. And as part of that shape, I also had to build in, again, the through line. So there's one of the lines on this area is continuous, it doesn't stop. Everything comes off it, goes into storage lines which are 2 or 3 trains long, and then through a series of junctions rejoins that, so that every single siding that's on here is totally independent of every other siding. So you could run a train in or out of any of them without interfering with the passage of any other train. On top of that, we then were governed by the height of the floor. So obviously the entry point to it, we needed it to be as low as we possibly could, but still give somebody the ability to get their hand under to change a point motor, stuff like that. Each layer then on top had to have the height for the train, the depth for a point motor and electrical wiring underneath, and still the ability for somebody to reach through, so that the length of their arm determined the depth. So you couldn't lean over anything, and you had to be able to reach any track when you're on your hands and knees, reaching sideways. The heights were determined at 220 millimetres, because that gave us the depth of the point motor, the height of the carriage, and the depth of someone's arm to retrieve something. So that then determined how many layers we could have. What then determined of how it worked was the ruling gradient. I then had to work out each siding, how many trains of how many lengths I could get into those sidings, knowing how many 8-car carriage sets we have, passenger sets, 6-car, 4-car, lengths of scenic trains, lengths of other bulk commodity trains that we have here. How many of them there are, that determined how many sidings I needed to have. And we had an idea of other trains that we would want to run. And therefore that 180 figure isn't just 180 lengths of the same length, it's 180 variable lengths to make up a total number. Following on from that then was, okay, how do we build it? And the building situation is the scenic layout over the top, if you like, envelops the storage underneath, but it's not structurally dependent on it, and the storage level is not structurally dependent on the layout over the top of it. So that then allowed me to come to the point with Model Railway Solutions.
We make modular baseboard systems and sell them via the internet, which are just flat pack baseboards that we send out, in a flat pack form. It's absolutely nothing like this at all. I mean, it's plywood, yeah, and it's model railways, but really that's where the similarities end. There's nothing.
There's nothing standard that we sell on our website in this room today.
Dave came into our workshop armed with a pile of plans and paperwork, asked us to look over it, see what we thought, and basically we thought the bloke's a nutcase. Putting it bluntly.
Yeah, and we told him that.
So he went away, and about a month later he took me down the pub. I don't quite know what happened, but we seem to be signed up for the project from that point onwards. The whole thing is built on a 2x2 frame, which is anchored to the floor joists, and from that point onwards each level has been CNC'd out of 9mm ply, which has 4 levels. 9mm exterior ply, drilled for risers every so often, as you can see, the blue risers, and then we've got 8mm threaded bar cut to a specific length to give us an equal distance all the way round. The edges have been routed out of birch ply, 9mm ply, all the edging all the way round, of which there's a hell of a lot of. The worst level is the first level because it's on the rise, so it starts off at a datum point, and then each set of risers, each pair of risers on the first level has to get us up to a specific height. From there on in, every single pair of risers is the same length. So it should be, in theory, just a case of going around, screwing risers on, and bolting the next level down, gluing it up.
In regards of where all the risers were, I then worked out a template for all of the boards that had to be cut. They were all laser cut. So I did all the dimension drawings for those. We put datums on the floor so that MRS knew exactly where to build them from, and all my drawings are based from those datum points.
Well, Steve's come up with all the plans, he's done the drawings. We work together, he tells us what we need to do next and where to carry on from, according to how far he's got in his plans. It's basically, if we've got any questions concerning heights and levels, he's the man to see.
We come in here 1 day a week, which is normally a Wednesday. So the important thing is to make sure that Pete's ready for us, Pete's laying the track and doing all the electrics. So he's got to be clear of a certain area for us to come in on a Wednesday and maybe lay more boards and glue them together. Okay, because there's no point laying another level if he hasn't finished the track work or the electrics underneath. You see, and in turn it works the other way around as well. Okay.
Once he's finished, we can then step in and carry on with the next bit. But we can't carry on with the next bit if he's still connecting and track laying. I
mean, you can easily lose a week by not really talking to each other and having a set plan just for that week, a week-on-week basis, you know. And in between you've got obviously David chucking in little swerve balls like he does pretty much every week, you know. One week he can say, oh, right, come up and level up that bit. We turn up with the tools and then he wants something completely different doing, but that's David for you. That's what he's good at doing, but we love him to bits. While you're building this and it's getting higher and higher, you have to think about the scenic top level, which obviously is going to be the last thing to be built, but we need to start thinking about the framework against the walls first before we get too high with all this, you know. So while we're putting on these levels and building it up, we're also starting to think about the finished height and the framework, the softwood, for the scenic stuff, because you won't be able to get to it otherwise if you don't do it now, you know.
By the design of having the storage system standing alone all by itself, the layout over the top is not structurally linked to it in any way, shape or form, that it's two completely separate environments. Therefore, we can run the storage layout completely separately from anywhere else. It's not connected to the upper layout, and we will be able to make it work and have it fully operational before we even start the scenic layout over the top of it.
You know, we're modelers as well. We go around people's houses, you know, garages, up in their lofts.
We see a lot.
We see a lot, but I haven't seen anything like this.